Inmate on death row. Before we dive in, hit subscribe if you're brave enough to step inside the darkest corners of the human mind. You've been warned. The storm had already swallowed the night when the sirens cut through the rain. By the time detectives reached the cracked asphalt road leading to the abandoned textile mill, the air felt wrong, heavy, metallic, as if the place itself was holding its breath. The call had come in only 10 minutes earlier. Possible homicide, unknown suspect fleeing on foot. But no one expected what they found. Inside the mill, soaked footprints led them through a maze of rusted machines and collapsed beams until they reached the center of the floor. A single lantern flickered beside a man's body, positioned strangely, almost deliberately. No sign of struggle. No weapon. No note. Just silence, and the sense that someone had been watching only moments before. Detective Mara Hensley crouched beside the victim and froze. The man's ID confirmed his name was Caleb Brooker, a local handyman with no criminal record, no enemies, and no reason to be here. But what chilled her was the mark scratched gently into the concrete beneath his hand, a small, uneven triangle. Not a symbol police recognized. Not yet. Outside, officers were detaining a lone figure found wandering near the back exit. Mud on his jeans. Blood under his nails. Wide, frantic eyes. His name was Eli Mercer, a 28-year-old drifter with a past full of gaps and stories that didn't add up.
He didn't resist. He didn't speak.
He only whispered one thing when handcuffs closed around his wrists. I didn't do it. He did. But there was no one else. The media exploded within hours. A violent murder. A suspect caught at the scene. And by sunrise, Eli was already being labeled a monster. His arrest was quick, his trial even quicker. The evidence was shaky, but it existed. Blood matched the victim. Footprints matched Eli's boots. And that strange carved triangle? Prosecutors claimed it was a ritualistic act, though they had no proof. Still, the jury didn't hesitate. Eli Mercer was sentenced to death. But Detective Hensley couldn't let it go. Something felt off. Eli didn't fit the crime. Not his profile, not his behavior, not the eerie way he kept repeating that someone else was in that mill. Someone no one saw. Someone who left no trace. 1 week after the sentencing, Hensley requested one final interview with Eli on death row. Through the reinforced glass, he looked hollow, exhausted, but strangely calm. I told the truth, he whispered. But nobody listened. He was there. In the shadows. And he wanted me to take the blame. Hensley leaned forward. Who was there, Eli? He hesitated, eyes drifting toward the corner of the visitation room, as if expecting someone to be standing there. You won't believe me, he murmured. But he's done this before. That sentence lingered with her for days. She dug back into cold files, analyzing unsolved murders in the state, searching for anything that could match the triangle symbol carved beneath Caleb Brooker's hand. For a while, nothing surfaced. Then, buried deep in an archive entry from 11 years earlier, she found it. Another victim. Another abandoned location. Another small, uneven triangle scratched into concrete. But the suspect in that case? He died in custody before trial. Before she could connect the rest, Hensley's phone rang. It was the prison. Something had happened in Eli Mercer's cell. When she arrived, officers were gathered outside the unit, whispering urgently. One of them pulled her aside, pale and trembling. Detective, we found a message. Inside his cell. But Eli swears he never wrote it. The officer handed her a folded photograph, taken only minutes earlier. On the wall beside Eli's bunk, smeared lightly across the paint, was the same uneven triangle. But this time, there were words beneath it. Words that made her stomach drop. You're getting close. Hensley stared through the bars, and Eli looked back at her, terrified. Detective, he whispered, do you believe me now? And then a guard shouted from the end of the block, voice cracking with panic. Ma'am, you need to see this. We found something else in the death row hallway. Whatever it was, it stopped her cold. And it changed everything. Detective Mara Hensley moved fast, her footsteps echoing through the narrow corridor of death row as officers guided her toward the disturbance. The hallway smelled of bleach and cold metal, but beneath it was something else, a faint trace of dust, as if the air had been stirred by someone passing through moments earlier. Two guards stood rigid near the far wall, both pale and refusing to look directly at what they'd found. One stepped aside, revealing a long, thin scratch running horizontally across the concrete, fresh, jagged, unmistakably deliberate. And beside it, drawn with perfect precision, was another triangle. But this one was different. It was larger, and it had a second shape beneath it. A circle. A symbol that didn't match anything from the mill, anything from the archives, or anything Hensley had ever seen. Someone had taken their time carving it. Someone confident enough to leave it in the most heavily monitored hallway of the prison. Hensley turned to the guards. Who walked this hallway in the last hour? The younger one swallowed hard. Only staff. And Eli during shower rotation. Anyone else?
No, ma'am.
Cameras didn't pick up anything unusual either. Cameras picking up nothing was exactly what disturbed her. Eli couldn't have carved the symbol. He'd been inside his cell. The corridor had constant surveillance. And yet the symbol was there, taunting her, like a signature left by someone who believed, knew, he couldn't be caught. When she returned to the interview room, Eli was pacing, breathing hard. The moment he saw her through the glass, he pressed both hands against it. He was here, he whispered. I felt him. I heard him. Eli, she said carefully. Who is he? He shook his head violently. You're not listening. He's the one who killed that man in the mill. He's the one who killed the others before. He hides behind people who can't defend themselves. He watches them panic. He makes them look guilty. Why you? She asked. Why pick you? Eli's voice cracked. Because I was alone.
Because I was easy.
Because he knew no one would believe me. Hensley leaned back, unsettled by the sincerity in his eyes, a kind of raw fear that couldn't be faked. Tell me his name. I don't know it, Eli whispered. But I know what he said before he disappeared the first night. He said, Death row is quieter for me. The room seemed to shrink around her. Death row. Quieter for me. As if he'd been here before. As if he was still here. Hensley left the prison with a knot tightening in her chest. She spent hours reviewing prison logs, staff shifts, visitor lists, any pattern, any anomaly. Nothing lined up. The killer seemed invisible, threading through official systems without leaving a mark. Then she found something. A month before Caleb Rooker's murder, a maintenance worker at the same prison disappeared without explanation. His shift ended at midnight. He left the building. He never made it home. His badge was found weeks later in a storm drain. His case was filed as a missing person. No leads.
No body.
But buried in his final digital checklist was an image he'd taken of a busted pipe near death row. In the corner of the frame, almost invisible unless you brighten the exposure, was a faint triangle scratched into the wall. The same symbol. The same shape. Weeks before Caleb was murdered. Hensley's breath caught. This wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a trail. Someone had been here long before Eli Mercer ever set foot in that textile mill. Someone with access. Someone who could walk past cameras without being seen. Someone watching the investigation unfold. At 3:17 a.m., her phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. No text. Just an image. A triangle. A circle. And beneath them, a timestamp. Tomorrow, 11:42 a.m. The exact time scheduled for Eli Mercer's execution. Hensley stared at the screen as her heartbeat thudded painfully against her ribs. A message like this wasn't a threat. It was a countdown. And she had less than 24 hours to uncover the truth before someone else died, or before the real killer vanished for good. The morning of the execution began with a sky drained of color, the kind of cold gray that made the prison yard feel like a forgotten world. Detective Mara Hensley arrived before sunrise, her badge clipped to her belt, her mind sharp but running on fear and adrenaline. She had less than 6 hours to solve a case that had taken 11 years to fully reveal itself. Inside, death row was unusually quiet. Officers moved stiffly, whispering to one another as if raising their voices would provoke something hiding in the walls. Rumors had already spread: the carved symbols in the hallway, the message on Hensley's phone, the unexplained gaps in surveillance footage. No one wanted to talk about it, but everyone felt the same thing. The killer was here. Still here. She made her way back to Eli Mercer's cell. He was sitting on the bunk, wrists shackled, staring at the wall. "You saw the message?" he asked softly. "Yes," Hensley replied. "Did you send it?" He shook his head. "Detective, I don't even have a phone." She knew that. But she had to hear it from him. She had to be sure. "Listen carefully," she said, leaning in. "There was another symbol carved near your cell. And one in a missing worker's last photo. This person, whoever he is, he's been around this prison longer than we thought." Eli exhaled shakily.
He follows patterns. He studies people.
He learns how they move, how they talk, how they panic. That's how he stays invisible. Invisible. The word echoed in her skull. Hensley pulled out the missing worker's file again. His name was Daniel Corver, 43. Maintenance staff. Last seen in the West Utilities corridor. She flipped through his photos, logs, and notes, and then she saw it. In every photo of Corver on the job, one man appeared in the background. Always blurred. Always looking away. Always in a different uniform: guard, janitor, electrician, medic. A man who blended in so perfectly that Corver's disappearance never pointed back to him. A man who could walk anywhere. A man who passed every camera without suspicion. Hensley zoomed in on the blurred face in each photo. The same cheekbone. The same hairline. The same narrow eyes. Her chest tightened. "Eli, I think I just found him." But at that exact moment, the prison lights flickered once.
Twice.
Then the power surged hard enough to make the metal rails vibrate. A guard sprinted down the hallway. "We've got a breach in utilities." Someone bypassed the security relays. Hensley ran. The corridor leading to utilities was dim, emergency lights struggling to keep the hall illuminated. The hum of generators shook the floor. And halfway down the hallway, she saw a shadow move. Fast, quiet, too precise to be a panicked guard. She drew her weapon. "Stop. Hands where I can see them." The figure turned slowly. A man in a guard's uniform.
Clean-shaven. Calm.
Eyes cold. He held up both hands, and in one of them dangled a small metal object, a broken maintenance badge. Daniel Corver's badge. "Detective Hensley," he said, voice steady. "You're earlier than I expected." Her pulse thudded violently. "You're the one who killed Caleb Rooker. You framed Eli." "I didn't frame anyone," he replied simply. "I chose him. There's a difference." She stepped closer. "Why Eli?" He smiled faintly. "Because the world never notices people like him. Society ignores its ghosts. I just used that to my advantage." "And the symbols? What do they mean?" He shrugged. "Nothing. I like patterns. Patterns make people curious. Curiosity makes them predictable." He took a step forward. "And you, detective, have been very predictable." Before she could react, the emergency lights died completely. Darkness swallowed the hallway. A scuffle. Footsteps. A metal door slamming open. By the time backup reached her, the utilities corridor was empty. No intruder, no badge, no symbol. Only a damp set of footprints leading toward a maintenance exit that fed into 2 miles of underground service tunnels. The killer had vanished. And at 11:42 a.m., the execution chamber stood ready. Hensley sprinted back upstairs, breath broken, shouting for the warden. "Stop the execution. Eli Mercer is innocent." They halted the procedure with seconds left. Eli collapsed in relief, hands shaking uncontrollably. But as they escorted him out of the chamber, a folded slip of paper fell from his jumpsuit pocket. No one had given it to him. No one admitted placing it there. Hensley unfolded it with trembling hands. A triangle. A circle. A new symbol beneath them. A sharp line slashed downward like a blade. And one sentence. "You saved the wrong man." Hensley froze. "Is this a threat?" the warden asked. She shook her head slowly, fear crawling up her spine. "No," she whispered. "It's a promise." Later, as she walked out of the prison, her phone vibrated again. Another unknown number. Another image. A woman standing alone in a parking garage, blurred, unaware she was being watched. And the timestamp beneath it. Next. The killer wasn't done. He was just getting started. If you thought this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it.